In this Webflow tutorial, I'll teach you how to do custom checkboxes. Let's get straight into it. So in this first example website, whistlerstreettattoo.com.au/tattoo-inquiry, we can see this is a typical contact us page for a tattoo parlor, but obviously it's asking specific questions. For example, full name, email address, phone number, preferred artist, how would you like your tattoo, etc. But you'll notice as I scroll down, we have this specific checkbox called preferred days. So this is when, if you want to have a tattoo in this shop, what is the best times or best days that you're available? And when the user hits, let's just say Wednesday and Sunday, you'll notice that as I tick the checkbox, it's actually branded towards the Whistler Street tattoo colors. In this case, it's this maroon color. And you'll also notice just below the submit inquiry or the submit button form, below we have this I understand Whistler Tattoo Street will be contacting me. So, sometimes you see in contact forms, I agree to be consent to your marketing materials or etc. So we have that checkbox as well, like a disclaimer checkbox. And you'll also notice this is branded towards the maroon. And what you'll realize is that if you actually use a Webflow element, by default, you cannot style it. So let me show you how that's done in Webflow. All right, guys, so I'm now in Webflow. I just have a form that I actually pulled from my existing website. LOL. And you can see that we just have email field and a message and a send message. But let's just say, for example, I actually want to add another field called, let's do preferred days again, preferred call time, right? And then below this, what we can do is we can actually add a checkbox. Let me go ahead and add a grid. So I can add this grid here and I'll call it checkbox grid. Again, you don't have to follow me in this case. I'm just laying stuff out. But right now, if I hit plus, and I'll go ahead and go into, as I scroll down, there should be a tab called forms. So we can see we have form block. That's actually what we want to add into the site. And then inside form block, it allows you to add stuff like labels, the input fields, the text area, which is the message area. And then there's also one called checkbox, but I'll also explain other stuff. We also have radio button, select, a capture, and a submit form button. But of course, we're focusing on checkbox. So as I add this into my grid, let's go ahead and straight away give everything a class. So right now with the checkbox selected, you can see my mouse is over it. Let's go ahead and just give it a class of custom-checkbox and hit enter. I spelled that wrong, custom-checkbox. And then from here, what I can do is just copy this checkbox field maybe a couple of times, 4 times, let's say, for example, and maybe give it a bottom margin of 1 rem. And now I can actually just say, let's say morning, we can just rename everything. So morning, afternoon, evening, and let's say nighttime. So nighttime. So right now I have 4 checkboxes that just say morning, afternoon, evening, night. Obviously you guys can call it whatever you want, but right now you'll notice if I actually hit the checkbox field and go ahead and hit settings right here, you'll notice a couple of things. Right now where it says form settings, this is the name of the form, so always give it a name. So when you get a form submission, this is what appears. But below that where it says checkbox field setting, it's extremely important to also name your fields. So right now by default it's called checkbox. So you can imagine, if I push this website live and someone fills in the detail and they tick morning, I won't actually get a submission saying morning. It would say checkbox as the name, and it would say true. So checkboxes are either true or false, but if it's checkbox, if it's named checkbox, I won't actually know, what it is. So it's always good to just give it a name. In this case, this is morning, and afternoon, we can go ahead and hit this and type in afternoon. And we can go ahead and just name the bottom 2 as well. I'm just not gonna do it, but always name the stuff. You also notice that in checkbox, you can actually hit required, which means the user actually has to tick it in order to submit the form. This is a good use case is, for example, by submitting this form, I acknowledge that I have read the terms and condition, or I acknowledge that I consent to marketing consent. So it depends if you want it required or not. I'm gonna untick it. And you'll also notice it gives you an option to say start checked. So right now, this is a great, way of user experience. If you want the user to just automatically consent to your marketing material, you can say something like, by checking this box, I agree that I consent to this marketing material, and you can actually leave it as start checked. And if the user doesn't want to opt in, they can actually just uncheck it. So, it's a bit of user experience and a bit of psychology, dark UX that you can apply, but that's something you can do. But more importantly, you'll notice that if I hit start checked, it actually is blue by default. So how do we change the color? In order to do that, we have to go where it says style default, we change it to custom. And by changing to custom, what we can do is we can actually select that checkbox that we given a class of custom-checkbox. And you'll notice that if I go to style now, I can actually literally style the checkbox where previously you cannot. So let's say, for example, we can change this to 1 rem. We can change the height to 1 rem. So right now I've given a width and a height of 1 rem. And more importantly, if you actually hit this drop down right here, you can see it actually has a state called checked. And you can tell that it's actually blue background by default. And you can only style it if you changed it to custom. And now as I scroll down, you can see what's going on. Right now, Webflow is automatically applying this tick icon. So again, we can now override it. And it's giving a background color of this default blue, which again, we can now override it. So let's go ahead and click into it. And let me just sample the color to be my brand color right here. And that looks pretty cool. We can even change the border to like a black or a white or whatever you want, no border. I'm going to change it back to my branding. And you'll notice that with this custom checkbox tick, we can actually just get rid of it now. So now we can actually turn it off, or we can actually add a different icon. But in this case, I'll just turn it off. And now you can see if we go back to none and we go back to previous the site, you can see that this custom checkbox in this specific case right here is actually an orange box. You'll notice the other stuff isn't actually applying the exact same style, even though it's sharing the same class. This is because you have to manually go into each one of them and hit from default to custom. And now it's because it's using the same class, now it actually applies the effect. So really what I should have done is I should have just made everything custom first and then copied and pasted it. I hope that made sense. So for example, if I delete these two, and now if I copy and paste this afternoon, rename this to evening and rename this to night, and making sure that I rename the actual name field right here to night and this one to evening. Because I copied and pasted, it also copied and pasted from default to custom. And you can see now it's all applying the custom checkbox right here. You'll notice that as I click into it, it has this blue hover state around it. This can also be changed. If you actually go back to custom checkbox, hit the drop down, this is where it's focus keyboard right here, this state right here. And you'll notice that it's actually applying this blue like overlay by default. So you can actually go ahead and just change it by clicking color and maybe make it like red, for example. And then you can also get rid of that style by applying a box shadow, let's say, for example, of like red. So now it has this red box shadow that is more in line with my branding. So right now, if I go here, you can see it has that red glow rather than that blue glow just by doing that style change. So that's essentially how you do custom checkboxes. Again, I'm not going to go into super detail, but you can also change the checkboxes to look like this as well. You can style it however you want, but I hope that helps. This really adds to, you know, the UI to make everything just much more branded towards your color, but this is how you achieve it. And I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.